fired up. We're still in Judith. You need a, Bob, you got it.
No, I got
You
it.
guys need a,
We have,
You want another one?
yeah, that'd be fine.
there you go.
Now, I'm just finding.
How far did we get to it? Did
We-
we get
we-
through the first one?
We got through chapter 1,
Okay,
I believe.
I think that's right.
I can't find it yet. Oh, it must be missing. No, it's me, but where, what's it after?
Chapter 2 of Judith.
Oh, I found it.
Okay.
Page, 13, but, okay. Should I go for it?
Yep, let's go for it.
They therefore sent messengers to him to sue for peace in these words: We, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, the great king, lie prostrate before you. Do with us whatever you will. See, our buildings and all our land and all our wheat fields and our flocks and herds and all our encampments lie before you. Do with them as you please.
Did she start 3 or 2?
Oh, am I?
Where are we starting? 2 or 3?
2, we're at 2.
Sorry.
Okay,
That's okay.
she started 3, I think.
Yeah, I was trying to,
I was trying to find it.
I
Yeah.
got the
That I
translation
didn't
said.
quite figure out.
I,
in the 18th year.
we got a new grandbaby, so
Oh.
my brain isn't really here.
You have a baby brain now.
We got, yeah, I lost sleep, so I'm sitting here. Ah. Okay, I'm ready now. In the 18th year, on the 22nd day of the first month, there was talk in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, about carrying out his revenge on the whole region, just as he had said. He summoned all his ministers and all his nobles and set before them his secret plan, and recounted fully with his own lips all the wickedness of the region. They decided that everyone who had not obeyed his command should be destroyed. When he had completed his plan, Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, called Holofernes, the chief general of his army, second only to himself, and said to him, Thus says the great king, the Lord of the whole earth, Leave my presence and take with you men confident in their strength, 120,000 foot soldiers and 12,000 cavalry. March out against all the land to the west, because they disobeyed my orders. Tell them to prepare earth and water, for I am coming against them in my anger, and will cover the whole face of the earth with the feet of my troops, to whom I will hand them over to be plundered. Their wounded shall fill their ravines and gullies, and the swelling rivers shall be filled with their dead. I will lead them away captive to the ends of the whole earth. You shall go and seize all their territory for me in advance. They must yield themselves to you, and you shall hold them for me until the day of their punishment. But to those who resist, show no mercy, but hand them over to slaughter and plunder throughout your whole region. For as I live and by the power of my kingdom, what I have spoken I will accomplish by my own hand. And you take care not to transgress any of your Lord's commands, but carry them out exactly as I have ordered you. Do it without delay. I'm stumbling over the word Holofernes, but I haven't heard that word before.
Holofernes, yeah.
Okay. So Holofernes left the presence of his Lord and summoned all the commanders, generals, and officers of the Assyrian army. He mustered the picked troops by divisions as his Lord had ordered him to do, 120,000 of them, together with 12,000 archers on horseback, and he organized them as a great army is marshaled for a campaign. He took along a vast number of camels and donkeys and mules for transport, and innumerable sheep and oxen and goats for food. Also ample rations for everyone and a huge amount of gold and silver from the royal palace. Then he set out with his whole army to go ahead of King Nebuchadnezzar and to cover the whole face of the earth to the west with their chariots and cavalry and picked foot soldiers. Along with them went a mixed crowd like a swarm of locusts, like the dust of the earth, a multitude that could not be counted. They marched for 3 days from Nineveh to the plain of Bechteleth and camped opposite Bechteleth near the mountain that is to the north of Upper Cilicia. From there Holofernes took his whole army, the infantry, cavalry, and chariots, and went up into the hill country. He ravaged Put and Lud and plundered all of the Rasasites and the Ishmaelites on the border of the desert south of the country of the
Chaldeans.
Chaldeans, but it means Chaldeans. Okay.
Now, since I've already interrupted you,
Yeah.
has any other part of Scripture have we heard about the towns of Put and Lud?
No.
Yeah, put somewhere. Have we?
I don't remember. It does. I mean, it sure wasn't a major metropolis.
It wasn't important enough for a town in Kansas, western Kansas, to be named after it.
That's right.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right. And so here Nebuchadnezzar is sending out this general with all these people, and I think it was what stood out to me as you were reading that, and it said, then he set out with his army to go ahead of King Nebuchadnezzar and overrun the entire region of the west with chariots, cavalry, and picked infantry. Along with them went motley hosts like a swarm of locusts.
Yeah.
These are just regular people who are gathering the spoils.
Onlookers? Oh, I see.
Oh,
I see.
I mean, they're gonna pick these areas clean.
oh my.
Kind of like we have rioters do today. huh?
Yeah, it's like the people who are breaking into Walgreens and grabbing.
Big screen TVs or whatever.
Yeah,
Oh.
and the law says you can steal up to $900 worth of stuff, so they never get prosecuted.
Oh.
But that's kind of the same thing. These people are, they're legitimate vandals. Now, assuming that this army goes through, I'm sure they're taking a few souvenirs too.
So, what is it? Maybe I just missed out. But so, remind me, what is it that Nebuchadnezzar asked them to do, and why are they in trouble?
Well, he had said, clear the way, the water and the land. That's kind of a Persian thing,
So it's just because they're there.
Well, they're not worshiping him as a god.
Got it.
Remember,
Thank you.
he's got
Yeah.
a big ego,
Okay.
and he wants all these towns to in the region. So he's sending Hophiles, or whatever his name is, Holofernes, sending him west from Nineveh to destroy the land and bring those people into him. So Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to continue this push to other parts, and that's when Judith gets involved.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just had to
That's
stop
okay.
with that.
I'm glad you explained that.
So
With
where are we starting now?
23 with Put and Lud.
The crowd of
Okay.
swarm of locusts, I didn't know what that meant. But I think I thought, I just wondered. So that explains it if they're going to steal stuff.
Yeah, I mean
I'm glad you said that. Okay, where was I?
24, I guess you could start at.
Then he followed the Euphrates and passed through Mesopotamia and destroyed all the fortified towns along the brook Abron as far as the sea. He also seized the territory of Cilicia and killed everyone who resisted him. Then he came to the southern borders of Japheth, facing Arabia. He surrounded all the Midianites and burned their tents and plundered their sheepfolds. Then he went down into the plain of Damascus during the wheat harvest, and burned all their fields, and destroyed their flocks and herds, and sacked their towns, and ravaged their lands, and put all their young men to the sword. So fear and dread of him fell upon all the people who lived along the seacoast at Sidon and Tyre, and those who lived in Sur and
Okina.
What?
Okina.
Okina. And all who lived in Jamnia. Those who lived in Azotus and Ascalon feared him greatly.
Okay. Remember that the Apocrypha has more. I can't think of the word I want. They're expanding everything. You know, they're talking. You know, he took, let's say, 100,000 troops,
Yeah.
and they wiped out all these towns. Well, I think that's inflated a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the times are going to differ. He's going to lay waste to the wheat fields, but you can't lay waste to wheat fields in Kansas in January. I mean, you got to wait till the wheat comes up. Yeah, I guess you could go in and beat it down, but, you know, they're going to want to harvest that wheat because they need it for food too. So, you know, he's covering a big area, and those soldiers have got to be tired. So now it was this Azotus and Ascalon were terrified of him. So what do? Spoil the surprise for us.
Okay. They therefore sent messengers to him to sue for peace in these words. We, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, the great king, lie prostrate before you. Do with us whatever you will. See, our buildings and all our land and all our wheat fields and our flocks and herds and all our encampments lie before you. Do with them as you please. Our towns and their inhabitants are also your slaves. Come and deal with them as you see fit. The men came to Holofernes and told him all this. Then he went down to the seacoast with his army and stationed garrisons in the fortified towns and took picked men from them as auxiliaries. These people and all in the countryside welcomed him with garlands and dances and tambourines. Yet he demolished all their shrines and cut down their sacred groves, for he had been commissioned to destroy all the gods of the land, so that all nations should worship Nebuchadnezzar alone, and that all their dialects and tribes should call upon him as a god. Then he came toward Esdraelon, near Dothan, facing the great ridge of Judea. He camped between Geba and Scythopolis, and remained for a whole month in order to collect all the supplies for his army.
Okay. So they're wiping out all the idols. They're not destroying cities now. They're destroying what they worship. And when it says they destroy the gardens or the groves, that's because some of these people were worshiping
In
the groves. Somewhere I saw that there's a Baptist church that calls itself the Grove.
Really?
I mean, you know, I never made that connection until reading Judith, but you know, they say, you know, we're the Grove. They're definitely not Episcopalian or Presbyterian or Lutheran, but that's why they mention the groves, is that's a place of worship, a holy shrine, you might say. They destroyed them.
Okay.
So, and they had a big party, but you know they were willing to give up their idols, their groves, for peace. And they said, "You want Nebuchadnezzar to be our god? Where do we sign?" You know, they were willing to turn it over. This almost sounds like the French. The French are the first to surrender in any war. We shouldn't pick on the French.
No.
They helped us out a lot.
Yes, they
The
did.
Brits back in the day.
I still remember Pitts, Forrest Pitts,
Yeah.
telling the story when during the Second World War, his troops, his platoon or whatever, got into France, and he marched through this one. He and a buddy went over, and they had wine, and they were drinking wine. He said, we got drunk. We couldn't find our way back to where our group was. So, anyway, let's go on with chapter 4.
When the Israelites living in Judea heard of everything that Holofernes, the general of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Assyrians, had done to the nations, and how he plundered and destroyed all their temples, they were therefore greatly terrified at his approach. They were alarmed both for Jerusalem and for the temple of the Lord their God. For they had only recently returned from exile, and all the people of Judea had just now gathered together, and the sacred vessels and the altar and the temple had been consecrated after their profanation. So they sent word to every district of Samaria, and to Cona, Beth-horon, Belmain, and Jericho, and to Toba and Azorah, and the valley of Salem. They immediately seized all the high hilltops and fortified the villages on them and stored up food in preparation for war, since their fields had recently been harvested. The high priest Joachim, who was in Jerusalem at the time, wrote to the people of Bethulia and Betomethaim, which faces Esdraelon opposite the plain near Dothan, ordering them to seize the main mountain passes, since by them Judea could be invaded, and it would be easy to stop any who tried to enter, for the approach was narrow, wide enough for only 2 at a time to pass. So the Israelites did as they had been ordered by the high priest Joachim. Is that supposed to be Jehoiakim in a different?
Yes.
Okay. And the Senate of the whole people of Israel in session at Jerusalem. And every man of Israel cried out to God with great fervor, and they humbled themselves with much fasting. They and their wives and their children and their cattle and every resident alien and hired laborer and purchased slave, they all put sackcloth around their waists. And all the Israelite men, women, and children living at Jerusalem prostrated themselves before the temple and put ashes on their heads and spread out their sackcloth before the Lord. They even draped the altar with sackcloth and cried out in unison, praying fervently to the God of Israel not to allow their infants to be carried off and their wives to be taken as booty, and the towns they had inherited to be destroyed, and the sanctuary to be profaned and desecrated to the malicious joy of the Gentiles. The Lord heard their prayers and had regard for their distress. For the people fasted many days throughout Judea and in Jerusalem before the sanctuary of the Lord Almighty. The high priest Joachim and all the priests who stood before the Lord and ministered to the Lord with sackcloth around their loins offered the daily burnt offerings, the votive offerings, and freewill offerings of the people. With ashes on their turbans, they cried out to the Lord with all their might to look with favor on the whole house of Israel. Keep going.
I lost you. What, you're at?
She's at the end of 4.
Chapter 4.
You finished.
Oh,
Should
okay.
I-
5.
Is there
Yeah,
a different version that would be?
You're reading the right one that I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's the one I got, it's got to be the right one.
I
Right?
keep
Yeah.
thinking that the word Holofernes is something I have learned in a different, differently.
Well, this was written by a Jewish author who may have used a different name. The 2nd century before Christ. So, this is a story,
Okay.
after they had been conquered once. Now, now they're back and they're trying to piece together their lives. And, it's when we look at Samaria, that's the northern kingdom. They drove the Samaritans, or I'm saying it right, the people in that northern kingdom, they drove them out. And so then you had the Jews. So, they were concerned, and Judah was a southern kingdom, and they were concerned because they had just got the temple back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, they just did not want somebody coming in and wiping them out again. They struggled, to get back in God's good graces. And now here we've got this Nebuchadnezzar who's sending this Hophanes, or how you pronounce it, in to control them. And they're not happy. Let's jump into 5.
It was reported to Holofernes, the general of the Assyrian army, that the people of Israel had prepared for war and had closed the mountain passes and fortified all the high hilltops and set up barricades in the plains. In great anger he called together all the princes of Moab and the commanders of Ammon and all the governors of the coastland and said to them, "Tell me, you Canaanites, what people is this that lives in the hill country? What towns do they inhabit? How large is their army, and in what does their power and strength consist? Who rules over them as king and leads their army? And why have they alone of all who live in the west refused to come out and meet me?" Then Achior, the leader of all the Ammonites, said to him, "May my lord please listen to a report from the mouth of your servant, and I will tell you the truth about this people that lives in the mountain district near you. No falsehood shall come from your servant's mouth. All these people are descended from the Chaldeans. At one time they lived in Mesopotamia because they did not wish to follow the gods of their ancestors who were in Chaldea. Since they abandoned the ways of their ancestors and worshipped the God of heaven, the God they had come to know, their ancestors drove them out from the presence of their gods. So they fled to Mesopotamia and lived there for a long time. Then their God commanded them to leave the place where they were living and go to the land of Canaan. There they settled and grew very prosperous in gold and silver and very much livestock. When a famine spread over the land of Canaan, they went down to Egypt and lived there as long as they had food. There they became so great a multitude that their race could not be counted. So the king of Egypt became hostile to them. He exploited them and forced them to make bricks. They cried out to their God, and he afflicted the whole land of Egypt with incurable plagues. So the Egyptians drove them out of their sight. Then God dried up the Red Sea before them, and he led them by the way of Sinai and Kadesh Barnea. They drove out all the people of the desert and took up residence in the land of the Amorites, and by their might destroyed all the inhabitants of Heshbon. And crossing over the Jordan, they took possession of all the hill country. They drove out before them the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Shechemites, and all the Girgashites, and lived there a long time. As long as they did not sin against their God, they prospered, for the God who hates iniquity is with them. But when they departed from the way he had prescribed for them, they were utterly defeated in many battles and were led away captive to a foreign land. The temple of their God was razed to the ground, and their towns were occupied by their enemies. But now they have returned to their God and have come back from the places where they were scattered, and have occupied Jerusalem, where their sanctuary is, and have settled in the hill country because it was uninhabited. So now, my master and Lord, if there is any oversight in this people, and they sin against their God, and we find out their offense, then we can go up and defeat them. But if they are not a guilty nation, then let my Lord pass them by, for their Lord and God will defend them, and we shall become the laughingstock of the whole world. When Achior had finished saying these things, all the people standing around the tent began to complain. Holofernes' officers and all the inhabitants of the seacoast and Moab insisted that he should be cut to pieces. They said, We are not afraid of the Israelites. They are a people with no strength or power for making war. Therefore let us go ahead, Lord Holofernes, and your vast army will swallow them up.
Well, kill the messenger. They didn't want to hear it. You know, but you understand what we just heard there. A recitation of the history of the Jewish people. We didn't get into detail about the 40 years in the desert, or the manna, or the water, or surrounding the town 5 times or 7 times, and the walls come coming down. It just says, hey, and it's interesting, because where do they say, where is this guy saying these people came from? Mesopotamia. Because they refused to worship the gods of their father. They worship in Chaldea. They abandoned the ways of their ancestors and worshiped the God of heaven, the God with whom they acknowledge. When the Chaldeans drove them out from the presence of their God, they fled to Mesopotamia, where they lived for a long time. Then their God told them to leave their new home and go on to Canaan, and they settled there. And because of the famine in Canaan, they went down to Egypt. This is kind of, the story. There's no mention of Abraham. There's no mention of
Moses.
Moses, or of Joseph being thrown in a well, and his brothers coming down and didn't recognize him, and to get food because there was a famine up where they were living.
But it's
So-
a good overview, quick history.
Yeah, and this history, compared to some of the histories that we had in Deuteronomy, where there was a recitation of,
Get down to details.
now this guy's trying to say, these people have got a God that he'll beat you. You can't go against him. He didn't go in to say that their God got them out of Egypt. He omitted that part. He just said they left Egypt. They were down in Egypt, and what were they doing in Egypt? They were making bricks. Those are pretty big bricks in the
Pyramid.
pyramids, yes. Although the pyramids were already there during this time. They already existed.
Well, the ancient aliens,
Yeah, the aliens put those up. And they put an eye in the top. Just take a look at a dollar bill and you'll know that
It's
they're.
right there, isn't it?
Yep. They were the first of the Masonic order. So, interesting story, I think. They're telling history from their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And have you noticed there's no mention of Judith?
We've come to Judith yet, haven't we?
Hmm?
We haven't come to her yet.
Nope. And we don't get to her until chapter 8.
Oh,
So maybe next week. Huh?
Yeah, hopefully
So we
next
tell all
week.
our friends that better come. We're going to hear about Judith now.
Yes.
that's right.
And as it says, as the title of chapter 8, Judith kills Holofernes. So, but this story it's a religious history of people of faith holding true to their faith. That we're just getting little bits of that. In this story, he's the guy that they sliced up, Archior, is saying their God's a pretty tough God. You don't want to mess around with their God. And I've noticed this capitalization thing. When they talk about the God of heaven, in verse 8, God, the G is capitalized. But later in that same verse, it says, the presence of their gods, they fled Mesopotamia. And then in 9, then their God told them to leave their new home. It's a small letter. Now, I don't know if that's a carryover from the translation or what. I know that when we get in the Old Testament, when they're talking about the God Yahweh, it's always a capital G. If they're talking about the false gods, it's always a lowercase g.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So, all right. We will pick up with chapter 6 next week.
It's good.